You're live.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to the House Committee on General and Housing. We are this morning taking up JRH 4, which is a joint resolution reaffirming support for the legislatively recognized Native American Indian tribes and bands of Vermont. And we have with us today Representatives Logan, Moricki, and Brannigan, who are sponsors, to introduce the bill to us, and Michael Chernick, Legislative Counsel, to walk us through it. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please take it away, and welcome very much to this committee. I think you know everyone in the room.
Thank you. Yeah. For the record, Representative Moricki from the Linden 4 District.
And I'm Representative Carolyn Brannigan from Franklin 1.
And Representative Kate Logan from Chittenden 16.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
It's a pleasure to have you here, gracing our halls.
I got involved with this, watching events unfold over the past year or so. And I had been here when we went through, set up the process for Abenaki recognition. And I supported that even because, even though I felt it was an absurd exercise for First Peoples to have to come to colonialists who came after the fact and ask for us to recognize them. That whole process seemed a little backwards to me, but yet that was the legal process we had to do. So we went through what I thought was a rigorous process, and not all the tribes who originally went through the process were recognized. Bring it up to date, there's been some concerns raised, especially from Canada, from some First Peoples in Canada, about the process and the legitimacy of Vermont Abenaki. And a lot has been written and said about Vermont Abenaki, but very little of it from the Vermont Abenaki themselves. And they haven't had a chance to defend themselves. And so we organized an event last month where they were able to presented from the teams. They presented some scholars who laid out their case for recognition. And the offshoot of that was there was a lot of support for continuing to and affirming our support for Vermont Abenaki, and we talked and thought a helpful next step might be to put together a resolution affirming that. And just quickly, I could share too something from Chief Don Stevens, that the legislators created a process, including scholars who recognize Vermont tribes, and has successfully followed that process. We've reaffirmed our relationship through legislation, proclamation, resolutions, and celebrated their achievements with them. We need to continue to make the tribes feel safe and valued here in Vermont. So, you'd like to add something?
Well, I'll just speak briefly. Again, my name is Carolyn Brannigan. I live in Franklin County, and I've been involved in this since since the idea of recognition came in the early 2000s. And lots of work, lots of testimony, lots of study has gone into this. And apparently I'm the only one still here from that original group. It included Vince Aluzzi, Diane Snelling, other names that you'll recognize. So they're certainly still around, but serving here, I'm the voice. So, but not the only voice, thankfully. New people have come along who also agree that this is an important thing. So we, as a result of that early legislation, which had its ups and downs, but we now are in a solid situation where the tribes all have ways to recognize who's a member of their tribe and who isn't. And the state has agreed to allow certain benefits to them because of that, based on federal law and what we can do regarding state recognition. Remember, this is not federal recognition, this is state recognition. And if this resolution allows you to look at this issue And if you decide to make changes, this is a time to do it. You don't have to do anything. You can take some testimony or not. You can do some studying or not. You can leave it right as it is and make no change. Nothing will happen to the recognition process that we already have established. So it raises the issue and is entirely as a result of the disturbing statements that came from Canada. I guess I'll stop there.
Kate, do you have anything you want to add to the excellent statements made so far?
Yes, I think those are excellent statements. I would affirm them. I think this is an important step we need to take right now as a body in order to provide some confidence to the Vermont Abenaki that we're not going to all of a sudden upend our recognition process. I don't know that, we're not here recommending that there should be some process for considering the Odanak and Wallanack claims of legitimacy for our Vermont Abenaki. I personally don't feel comfortable as Representative Mrowicki said, as a colonialist. My family first arrived in New England in 1635. And so, yeah, I don't know what the right process is to resolve the tensions between the Wallanack, Odanak, and the Vermont Abenaki, but it certainly isn't through passing a bill to remove the recognition of the Vermont Abenaki. And also, I know that there's just been a tremendous amount of stress and concern, anxiety caused over the past year by the biased coverage there has been on this issue. And so it felt important to make an affirmative statement.
Any questions by the committee? Yes.
Why did you make the distinction that it's state and not federal recognition?
We have the power here in the state legislature to grant state recognition. The federal recognition comes from Washington. When we were writing the legislation to grant state recognition, we had a great deal of communication with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington. They were asked several times to grant federal recognition. They, for several reasons, decided not to do that. So that fell to us. In order for the tribes to have the advantages recognition gives them, it fell to us to grant that state recognition. The advantages are mainly two. I say two because they're economic advantages. One is Indian craftsmen, if they are recognized and accepted as a member of the tribe, they can sign their artwork, whether it's pottery or making a canoe or basket weaving, they can sign it as native made. And that way it's worth a lot more money and is a huge economic development tool. The other thing is children who want to go to college, several of our New England universities and across the country offer free or reduced tuition to kids who qualify. They still have to qualify academically, but then because they are Abenaki, they get this huge reduction. Dartmouth is one. I know the University of Vermont is considering one too. So that's why state recognition was important. Federal recognition is important also, but the tribes here in the state couldn't ever get to that point. Not because they aren't natives. It's because in order to achieve recognition, you have to have extensive and documented genealogy. A lot of what our people have, our tribes have here from Vermont is in Canada. They're French or they've been destroyed over time. So because these folks were nomadic, nothing exists at all until the Jesuits came in the 1600s. And a lot of those church records have no longer survived. So anyway,
And
I guess that's enough.
one of the
Okay.
considerations that contributed to that as well was Vermont's practice of eugenics.
Yeah.
And for which we officially apologized several years ago, but it caused a lot of people to go underground
Mhm.
and have just resurfaced, and I think there might be gaps in records because of that. But I think understandably, they went underground because they were one of the targeted populations in the practice of eugenics here. And Mike, did you help write the
bill? I had some involvement, with peripheral involvement back in 2010.
Mike, you should introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Michael Chernick from Legislative Council. I drafted the resolution.
If there are no more questions, are there any other questions? Mike, you want to come up and just walk
Sure.
through the resolution?
If you'll excuse me, I can be available for more questions, but I'm
I know where you
walking
are.
to other places though. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you.
Whatever you like.
Yes, Carolyn, there's no reason.
Yeah, there's
you
no
have to
reason
leave.
you can't stay right up there.
I will stay if that's okay.
You want to stay at the table?
It's more than okay.
Okay. Good morning, members of the show. Good morning. My name is Michael Chernick, and I am the legislative counsel who drafted in conjunction with Sophie, who looked this over, since she is the topical attorney who handles Abenaki matters. And let's see here. Here we go. Files actually. Temporarily merged here. One moment. Here we go. This resolution, I should explain, is a reaffirmation of the 2010 legislation. It does not change the underlying act. That would require a bill. And that is not what this is. This is exclusively a reaffirmation. And also as an explanation, only the feds through the Bureau of Indian Affairs can grant recognition on the federal level. And that makes tribes available for various federal grants and programs. The state can't issue federal regulation, federal recognition. And based upon this, the various Abenaki bands and tribes and groups aren't available for federal benefits, but they are available, as Representative Brannigan said, for purposes, for example, of artwork. They can sign it as native, and it's far more valuable to them that they can sign that than if they didn't have that imprimatur. With all that being said, this is a joint resolution. And just to explain again, I was asked earlier why this is coming into committee as opposed to just going on the floor on the concurrent calendar. And that is because this is a policy resolution, and policy resolutions normally are treated as bills. The speaker has a little bit of leeway under the House rules, but the general practice is that they're treated as bills and they go through first, second, and third reading in both chambers. So with all that being said, this is a joint resolution reaffirming support for the legislatively recognized Native American Indian tribes and bands of Vermont. Whereas in 1 VSA section 18511, the General Assembly found that at least 1,700 Vermonters claim to be direct descendants of the several indigenous native peoples now known as Western Abenaki tribes who originally inhabited all of Vermont and New Hampshire, parts of Western Maine, parts of southern Quebec, and parts of upstate New York for hundreds of years, beginning long before the arrival of Europeans. And whereas 1 VSA 851-2, the General Assembly also found ample archaeological evidence that demonstrates that the Missisquoi and Kavasek Abenaki were indigenous to and farmed the river floodplains of Vermont at least as far back as 1100s, as the 1100 AD period. And whereas in 1 VSA 851-3, the General Assembly further found that the Western Abenaki, including the Missisquoi, have a very definite and carefully maintained oral tradition that consistently referenced the Champlain Valley in Western Vermont. And whereas 1 VSA 852A establishes that the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs to recognize the historic and cultural contributions of Native Americans Vermont, and 15183C created a set of criteria for future state recognition of Native American Indian tribes and bands. And of course, that's in the Green Books now. And whereas to date, the General Assembly has extended state recognition to the Ilnu Abenaki tribe, the Nuligan Band of Consuk Abenaki Nation, the Cossack Abenaki of the Coas, and the Missisquoi St. Francis Sokoli Band. Now, therefore, be it resolved, and this is the operative part, that the General Assembly reaffirms its support for the legislatively recognized Native American tribes and bands of Vermont, their geological legitimacy, and the system established in 1 VSA Chapter 23. That's the overall chapter, the Abenaki chapter, a Native American chapter, rather, for extending further state recognition of Native American Indian tribes and bands, and be it further resolved that the Secretary of State be directed to send a copy of this resolution to the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs. End of resolution. There you go.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Any questions of Mike? Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Mike.
Sure. My pleasure.
So this bill, like all the bills on our wall, has now been introduced. And not necessarily heard. That would mean it would have to come off the wall. And at this point in the life of our committee, that has not been scheduled. Any questions before we adjourn?
So what are the next steps for this? So it's introduced, it's here, it lives in here on our wall
Correct.
until
You take it off.
until we take it off.
Yeah.
And if we don't take it off, nothing happens with the current statute.
That's right. Status quo prevails.
Okay, and if we do take it off,
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. We have testimony.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may just add a purely procedural comment.
Please.
And that is that because you're in the first year of the biennium and not the second, any legislation introduced this year that is sitting on your wall when you come back in January is still sitting on your wall and is exactly where you left it in the spring when you left.
Correct. So we could take it up if we wished at any time during either the remainder of this session or next session. And at this point, we do not have that on our schedule.
Okay,
We're
thank you.
still trying to figure out the two.
So this being a resolution and not legislation typically, and I'm new this year, still is this, if we take testimony, is this a situation where we might have things added in and struck out like a typical piece of legislation?
It's
Up or down?
if I may, Mr. Chair,
Please.
it's treated, a resolution that you have in committee, you treat it from a procedural perspective, the same way you would a bill. You have the right to amend it, strike it, amend it in one clause, whatever you want to do. The floor has that right. And then when it goes to the Senate, as it would, the House to pass it, the Senate would have all of those same rights as well.
And it's on the floor. There can be floor amendments. It's identical. Michael, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And at this
Thank you.
point, if there are no further questions of the committee, we are scheduled this afternoon after the floors come back. I'm not at all sure that the joint hearing will materialize at this instance, since there are many discussions going on. But I think you should all plan on coming back to committee to see where we are at least and see what's going on.
And we can send out a text and make sure that one of us, however we're gonna move forward, we can make a comment on the floor to remind people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, use the final one.
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
10 minutes, yeah.